All right, so if you've ever taken a photo of a landscape or came across a photo that you liked and wanted to paint and you painted and it just didn't turn out right, this video is going to be extremely helpful for you. Because in this video, I'm going to show you how I go about choosing photos to paint landscapes. It's like the first step in the process. And this video is actually going to be the first of a series of 3 videos. Next week, I'm going to release a video showing you how I do a compositional sketch using these new markers that I got just to create like a value study. And then the following week, I'm going to show you how I do the painting. But today, I'm just going to show you a photo and explain what I like about it and why I chose it. And I'm also going to show you some examples of photos that are similar that I went through that I didn't choose and explain why I didn't choose those, because I feel like that's just as important. All right, welcome to Paint Coach. If you're new to the channel, my name's Chris Fornatero, and I help thousands of students every single month get better at painting, whether it's on my online courses on Teachable, or I've had over 16,000 students go through those, or my Patreon page where I release a new full tutorial every single week, or here on YouTube with these free videos. All right, so here is the photo that I liked. I took this in Jackson, Wyoming a couple summers ago when I was on a hike. And I just want to say this before diving into this. The more experience you get painting, and especially the more experience you get with composition, the wider range of possible references you're going to be able to use. Like I can remember, especially when I first started plein air painting, I would go out to paint and I just couldn't find anything good to paint because I didn't know certain things about landscapes. Like I didn't know what things made good paintings. So I would literally drive like 45 minutes out to places, like walk around for another hour and like come home not even having like broken out my paint set because I was like, I don't know what to paint. Like nothing looks good. Nothing's, inspiring me to paint or like making me excited to paint. And it's funny because I see a lot of times with beginners, and like myself included, a lot of times beginners will choose to paint something for the wrong reasons. They will choose a scene because they like a certain light effect, or they like the color of water, or like the color of the sky or something. Like that stuff's good. Like it's good to want to paint that stuff, but that's not what's going to make your painting work. And a lot of times what I see students do is like, they'll find that one element that they want to paint and they'll paint that. And then like everything else in the scene is just kind of like there so they can go and like paint that like little light effect or that sunset or something like that. So just know like the more you practice, the more options you're going to have. And it's so cool. And like, that's why I highly suggest keeping albums on your phone or your computer of photos you take, because there's so many times that I have like kept photos because I saw something, like I was out there and I took a photo. I was like, oh, this could make a great painting. And I don't use it for years. Like I took this, I think over 2 years ago, and it just came to my attention now as I was going through. I was like, oh, that can make a good painting because I have more knowledge now. Like I can make more photos work than I could before. So always save your photos. But the first thing I see here is I see simple shapes, meaning I'm going to go to the filter gallery, blur gallery, field blur, and I'm just going to blur this. So many times I look at something and I squint, and I'm trying to see if the photo lends itself to simple big shapes. Now, again, the more advanced painter you are, the more you can take a photo that doesn't have necessarily clear shapes and make them clear shapes. But if you're starting out and if you want to make things easier on yourself, choose something where the shapes are kind of like already made there for you. This is why a lot of times painters will try to paint either in the morning or kind of like later in the evening when the sun is lower, because shadows become more distinct, like light and shadow shapes become more simple and distinct. And looking at this, I see very clear shapes. Like I see this path. It's like a very clear shape. A little note, this is like dappled light. Just know dappled light is a very easy thing to change. It's going to be very easy for me if I wanted to just make all of this, the color and shadow, and then come back with, whatever color, the light, and put light wherever I want. So just right off the bat now, like I'm thinking about that. That's going to be the thing. A lot of these things I tell you might not make full sense now, but hopefully by the end of this video series, you see the process play out. You're like, oh, like I kind of see what he was doing with, you know, ignoring that dappled light. So just kind of hang with me if certain things don't make sense. And then I see, you know, like I'm still even squinting my eyes, you know, again, get rid of that dappled light. I kind of see this is like all one big dark shape. These trees, simple shape, even the negative space. Like if I wanted to put in these, you know, those shapes, this light grass, and then these trees. So I kind of see, oh wow, it's two different color reds. I didn't realize that. It's easy to make those out. Like it was easy for me to spot those. And the next thing that I look for are the lines of the scene. One, like if the lines are obvious or not. And here it's pretty clear. You know, again, you got this path. Whenever there's a path or a river or something like that, I feel like those are always a little easier to kind of start you out on a easy path, no pun intended, with the composition. You know, you got this line here. You know, I kind of made this line a little more curvy than it should be. I should just, you know, that's kind of the line there. Got this and this tree line. I'm like, okay, those are very clear lines. You know, you could probably even say that this grass here is another line. And while I'm looking at the lines, I'm also trying to think, okay, like where are these lines leading? Because hopefully, or ideally, I want them to lead to a focal point, and I don't want that focal point to be dead center. So these lead pretty much all to the same place, which is right here. And now, yes, it's a little too close to center, but I know I can move that. I'll get into that in the next video when I'm doing the sketches. But when I'm thinking of a focal point, there's different ways to make a focal point. You can make it the area of highest contrast, which I feel like is like the most common thing. You know, it's a lot of times the area where your darkest dark and your lightest light touch, or it's like the only area where darkest dark and lightest light touch. It can be an area of like higher saturation of color. It can be an area of more hard, crisp edges, you know, like whatever's going to draw your eye there. Like if you have a scene and all the edges are pretty soft, nothing's very crisp, and then like you get to the focal point and it's like very crisp edges, you know, maybe even use like a palette knife, and that's going to draw your eye there. But I always like to try and get high contrast, and this is like definitely the lightest part of the scene. And I got like all this shadow here, so I'm like, all right, it's going to be right next to a dark, so I like that. I mean, ideally, I'd like to be kind of over here, but I know that I'll be able to, you know, kind of shift that and, you know, kind of maybe have the path be more like that and move these trees over so they kind of start here, and now it's, you know, it's on the left side of the painting. All right, I'm going to interrupt the video just for a minute. If you're watching this, you're obviously into landscapes, and if you're into landscapes, there's probably nothing more important to learn than composition, which is why I've made a free composition coaching guide. It's a series of videos where I break down composition so it is simple, so you can understand it and you can implement it in your own paintings, so you don't waste a bunch of canvases and painting paintings or painting landscapes that are doomed right from the start because you don't understand composition. If you want to check that out, again, it's completely free. There's a link to it in the description of this video. Another thing that I really like about this is that there's very distinct light and shadow, meaning, again, like ignoring this dappled light, which I know I can just, again, like fill in because I have reference for this path and shade. So like when I paint it, I can just, you know, say, okay, that's all in shade. Same with this grass. It's very easy for me to just say, okay, it's all in shade first. And then if I want to put in dappled light, which I do, it's going to be easy for me just to go in and put it in. But back to what I was saying is that I like how it's very clear that this is all in shadow and this is all in light. It's like very clear. You'll see in some of the photos I'm going to show later, like it's not so clear. I also like that it's dynamic. Now, dynamic is a word you'll hear a lot with composition and paintings, meaning things aren't equal. I always say, like, imagine a scale, you got something big, you want something small. Like, you're always looking for that. You're always looking for things to be different in the scene. And this, as far as the light goes, it's very clear that, you know, all of this is shadow and just a little bit of light there. That's interesting. It's an interesting idea for a scene. It's you as the viewer are in the shadows and you're looking down this path to the light, the little bit of light that's outside of this forest. It's an interesting idea to play with. So I'm like, okay, I really like that. And then I asked myself, okay, what do I like most about this scene? Like, what element do I want to enhance? Like, if I liked the trees the most, this might not be the angle that I'd want to take the photo from. I'd probably like want to walk up here, stand here, and take a picture of these trees where they take up the most space in the scene. I always say, like, whatever you want it to be about, make that take up the most space in the scene. And it's interesting sometimes because, like, what might be most interesting here, which it is to me, is this light part at the end. But it's interesting to me only in comparison to all the rest of the shadow. Like, if I had stood closer, or if I cropped the scene and did something like this, now this light, the light part is taking up the most part of the scene and only this part is shadow, but it's not getting at like really what was drawing me to take this photo and what like I thought would be an interesting, painting to make. So I like that. I like the dynamics of that. I like the path. Like this, the path is probably the thing that I'm most excited to paint because of this dappled light. And I probably will make it take up a little bit more space in the scene. But again, I'll get to that in next week's video when I actually do the sketch. Those are the reasons why I like this. And I know things still might be confusing. Don't worry, they will make more sense once you see like the next few videos. I want to show you some scenes that are similar that I don't think work or I wouldn't choose to paint. All right, here's one that I took early on in the hike. It's a similar scene. It's a path. It's got some dappled light. It's got some trees. One of the things it definitely does have going for it is what I talked about of it's very clear. It's predominantly in the shadows. It's only like a little light in these trees back here, but it's not the simple shapes of light and shadow just aren't there. Like all of this here, it's like, okay, lost my thing. It's like, all right, these are in shadow here, but then back here it's light. There's some light there. There's some light there. It's not very clear. It'd be one thing if I guess these trees were thicker, which again, I could probably fake and do, if you're skilled enough. Again, you can make it work, but I guess like imagine, maybe this could work if, these trees were thicker and you didn't see the lit trees behind them. It's like thicker and all you did see was, back here and it was really bright. That could work. This path, I could see it being interesting to paint. You got this dappled light that's shooting this way. That could be interesting. You got a tree, you might be able to do something with that. But just like right off the bat, it just didn't jump out at me. Like the shapes didn't obviously jump out to me. I feel like this scene's kind of like halfway there. I think if I really spent time and tried to like figure it out, I could probably make it work because it's like this shape's pretty clear. Again, if I filled these trees in more, these shapes could be pretty clear. And maybe if I cropped it, maybe like this, like emphasize the path more. Now you got a path. And then again, like you have like a light at the end of the tunnel type thing going on here. And again, like filling a lot of this in with more foliage so you don't have a bunch of light areas. Could possibly work. And again, doing this dappled light stuff could be there. So this one's kind of like halfway there. All right, here's another one that I took, and these were all like on the same path that I was on. Let's get my little red marker here. Now this one, like I look at it and like, all right, again, like a similar kind of idea here with, we have a path, got light. These shadows of the trees are kind of cool, but again, like what I was saying with the first one that I did like, it was very clear light and shadow. It is very clear that most of it was in shadow. Like this one as is, I feel like there's almost equal parts light equal parts shadow. If I were to paint this, I would try to either make all of this in shadow, like maybe, you know, whatever's these trees casting the shadows, maybe there's a lot more of those trees, and all of this, you know, I would just continue and keep all of this in shadow, kind of something like that. I could still have some dappled light in there on the path just to kind of like a cool effect, but you know, this would require like a pretty big change. I'd want this tree to be also in shadow, so maybe, you know, just imagine that's all in shadow right there. So now I kind of have like the same idea as the past view, which is like a path with some light at the end. This one just took a lot more changing to get there. And you could do the opposite though. You could say, like, because since you have the reference here of, you know, these grasses in light and shadow and the path in light and shadow, you could do the exact opposite and say, what if everything was in light? There was no shadow. You could see how that looked. And now the idea is more about the area that's in light, and maybe even push, because the light's coming from the left, maybe push this a little bit more. But even still with that, I don't know, I would probably still want to crop it, maybe like cut that off, because that idea of balance, like I feel like I don't know what I'm emphasizing. Like, am I more interested in the path or am I more interested in this tree? Like, they're kind of taking up the same amount of space. So either, you know, maybe I would crop it here to just like get rid of that. So now it's definitely more about this path and then this dark passage right before the light there, but it's mostly, everything's mostly in the light. Let me show you one more. Now here's one that, you know, it's a cool scene. Like, it's got rocks, it's got the light, it's got the shadow. But like when I first look at this, it is not easy to break this down into simple shapes. Like, I mean, I see, you know, there's the shadow, and then there's this tree that's in shadow, and then there's these little shapes back there, and then this is in light, and then you got this rock and this. So this, it would take a lot of changing or simplifying. I mean, yes, it does have the path, you know, the lines there, but other than that, like, I don't know. I mean, this slanted hill back here, this, like, that's kind of interesting, but it just, this would take a lot. Like, you know, kind of all it has to me right now are just the lines here. You know, this tree, maybe a good vertical, but like, it's hard for me to like simplify this one. So this one probably would not go with. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, like, this is the first video in a series of videos. Next week I'll be doing sketches of this, kind of walk you through that process, and then the following week I'll walk through the painting. So make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you get notified when the rest of the series comes out. If you would like to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. I'm Chris Fornatero, here telling you to go get painting.